You cannot believe everything you read. You cannot believe everything you hear. You cannot believe everything you see on TV. You cannot believe what you see online. Trust no one, because the universe is out to get you. This is the mind of the conspiracy theorist. No event is random. Someone or something is in control. But if we do our own research, we'll find that the truth is out there. The world of music is not immune to any of this. Did you know, for example, that Western music is being used to manipulate the minds of billions of people? That JonBenét Ramsey was not murdered and actually grew up to be a famous singer? That the music industry conspired to kill rock in the late 1980s in favor of boy bands? That the U.S. intelligence community was somehow involved in the rise of the California folk scene in the late 1960s? And what about this? Everything that we've been told about the Beatles is not only wrong, but a lie. And finally, all Western music is designed to control you in ways you never imagined. I'm Alan Cross, and this is episode 70 of Uncharted Crime and Mayhem in the Music Industry. And we're up to part 3 of music's greatest conspiracies. Beware, this program is not for the paranoid. Now, you would think that music is a safe space when it comes to escaping from the complexities and the stress of the world. But it turns out that the musical universe can be just as weird, if not weirder, than all the other things being whispered about: 9/11, chemtrails, rigged elections, black helicopters, alien cover-ups, Charlie Kirk, Freemasons, weather manipulation, the Philadelphia experiment, the protocols of the Elders of Zion, and of course, Jeffrey Epstein. The best and most enduring of these conspiracies all have one thing in common. There is a grain of truth in there somewhere, something just enough to build a wacky theory around. We've gone deep into some conspiratorial rabbit holes over the past couple of shows. Elvis and Jim Morrison and Tupac faked their own deaths. Gangsta rap was a creation of the CIA and the private prison system. Avril Lavigne and Eminem were replaced by clones. And we're about to continue. One of my favorites has to do with the entirety of Western music. In 1955, an international agreement was signed declaring that middle A on the piano be forevermore tuned to exactly 440 hertz. It thus became the audio frequency reference for tuning all musical instruments all over the world. This is the correct way to tune an instrument for the universe. However, some disagree. They will reference musical theory that extends all the way back to Plato, involving the ratios of notes to one another. Based on Platonic tuning, middle A should be tuned to 438 hertz, which they say is more natural and in keeping with the natural frequencies of the universe. Or maybe it should be 432 hertz, or middle A should be at 528 hertz because it's and this is a quote, a digital bioholographic precipitation crystallization and miraculous manifestation of divine frequency vibrations forming harmonically in hydrospace. I have no idea what that means. But here's where we get conspiratorial. There's allegedly something sinister and evil about middle A being tuned to 440 hertz. Something wrong about that frequency. It is said that the Rockefeller Foundation had an interest in making sure the United States adopted the 440 hertz standard in 1935 as part of a war on consciousness, leading to musical cult control. The theory says that by tuning all music to 440 hertz, you could turn it into a military weapon. Let me quote from one of the many online articles on the subject. The monopolization of the music industry features this imposed frequency that is herding populations into greater aggression, psychosocial agitation, and emotional distress, predisposing people to physical illnesses and financial impositions, profiting the agents, agencies, and companies engaged in the monopoly. Going a little further, we end up with the Nazis. The story goes that propaganda minister Joseph Goebbels insisted on 440 hertz tuning because he believed it made people think and feel in specific ways, and to make them, and again a quote, a prisoner of a certain consciousness. And if you're trying to mobilize the population for Der Fuhrer, well, that's what you want, right? Another quote. The powers that be are successfully lowering the vibrations of not only the young generation, but the rest of us as well. These destructive frequencies entrain the thoughts towards disruption, disharmony, and disunity. Additionally, they also stimulate the controlling organ of the body, the brain, into disharmonious resonance, which ultimately creates disease and war. All right, there's something to think about the next time you slip on some headphones and listen to your favorite music. Are you feeling more warlike and diseased? Now that we've debased all music, let's concentrate on a couple of specific theories, starting with the real identity of Katy Perry. You remember the story of JonBenét Ramsey, right? The 6-year-old beauty queen who was found murdered in the basement of her parents' home in Boulder, Colorado on December 25, 1996. She'd gone missing earlier in the day, and despite what we were assured was a thorough search, her body was found with a fractured skull and obvious signs of strangulation. There was also a ransom note. Despite years of investigation, no one has ever been convicted of her death. Any and all suspects have been cleared. Now, to be clear, there was a body, there was an autopsy, and there was a burial of a 6-year-old. But some believe that JonBenét Ramsey is very much alive. She just grew up to become Katy Perry and is now a worldwide pop superstar. The basics of this musical conspiracy are pretty flimsy. Her death was faked so she could go into hiding and then develop into the superstar that she is today. All right, fine. Okay, let's explore this. Katy Perry was born in 1984. JonBenét was born in 1990. What about that 7-minute AI-generated video that circulated online in 2014 showing JonBenét Ramsey morph into Katy Perry with the caption, "Wake up, people"? When she saw that video when it made the rounds again in 2025, Katy didn't joke in response. She said, "Wait, I am." Yes, but that's hardly proper evidence. Yet people today continue to believe and dig up proof that we're all being scammed. Over the past couple of episodes, we've talked about how the CIA has been involved, allegedly and actually, in directing the music industry in nefarious ways. Welcome to the world of psyops once again. Let's go back to the 1960s when the hippie counterculture was at its peak. This youth movement frightened the establishment because they saw it as a destabilizing influence on the status quo and the political power machines. That is absolutely true. But some people have taken this anti-counterculture fight to interesting places. In his book, Weird Sides Inside the Canyon, researcher David McGowan found some interesting connections, or so he believed. First, he found it odd that many of the people involved in the Southern California musical counterculture had family connections to the military or American intelligence apparatus, which is the CIA and its predecessor, the OSS. The list included Jim Morrison, Jackson Browne, and Frank Zappa. Could this have something to do with many of these musicians and their friends hanging out in Hollywood and Laurel Canyon and weren't drafted to serve in Vietnam? Now that you mention it, it does seem kind of odd. Funny, too, given how close those areas are to various military installations. There were a lot of drugs, too. Were these communities of musicians allowed to consume all sorts of drugs? Drugs possibly peddled by the CIA to mellow them out and prevent them from organizing politically? Maybe it was best to have them stoned and playing their guitars than getting their peers riled up about Nixon, Vietnam, women's rights, and civil rights. And since we're talking about the late 1960s, there's the inevitable connection to Charles Manson. Manson, of course, was connected to Dennis Wilson of the Beach Boys, to the point where Manson and members of the family moved into Wilson's house for a while. That is absolute fact. Was Manson and his family tied to CIA mind control operations like MKUltra? And were they encouraged to go on their murderous rampage to frighten the population about how malevolent the hippies could be, thereby creating a wholesale rejection of counterculture values? Again, nothing has been proven, but these theories exist. Now, Billy Corgan of Smashing Pumpkins has entered the chat. He noticed something strange about the music biz at the end of the 1990s. Rock was huge throughout that entire decade, and suddenly, it wasn't. There was a sudden shift to pop and hip-hop at the end of the 1990s, and rock was cast aside by the music industry. Billy thinks this is suspicious, And in early 2026, he spilled the beans on his podcast, The Magnificent Others. I'll just quote him. "I think that rock has been purposely dialed down in the culture. If you were at MTV or around MTV in 1997, 98, and suddenly they decided rock was out when rock was still very, very high up in the thing, and it was replaced by rap, right? Their standards and practices immediately shifted. Some people assert that the CIA was involved in all that. Again, above my pay grade, but I saw it happen. I did witness it happen." I'm not sure if he's serious. Does he believe that the CIA collaborated with Viacom, MTV's owner at the time, to sink rock? Maybe. But it is a fact that rock and pop go in cycles that, at the time, moved in 12 and 13-year cycles. When rock is hot, pop is at its nadir. But over time, demographics and economics begin to push rock out of favor, and pop goes on the ascent. This is a cycle that ran from the early 1950s to the late aughts. No CIA. And the only corporate collusion has to do with chasing advertisers and keeping up with the demands and the wishes of young people. And that, of course, changes with the times. At the end of the 1990s, rock was on the descendant, and pop was super hot. But then, a few years later, the positions were reversed, thanks to the indie rock revival. Rock then came super hot again through to about 2008. But then, the rock-pop cycle broke because of streaming. Streaming made everyone their own music director. No one had to depend on just radio or music video channels or record stores or music magazines and major record labels for music anymore. It's a great theory, Billy, but in the absence of any kind of credible CIA whistleblower, this conspiracy will remain, shall we say, unproven. Since we're on the topic again, let's look at more alleged government conspiracies that used music for their own evil purposes. And we're going to start with a nerve gas experience. Oh yeah, that's next. The internet has allowed like-minded people on the fringes to find each other, find kinship, and amplify their stories. And it's always fun to look at evil governments. So let's look at more of those conspiracies. At the end of the 1990s, a man from England named Com insisted on his website that the punk rock of the 1970s was the result of a nerve gas experiment gone wrong. Instead of being fatal, people who were exposed to it lost all their hair, except for a strip down the middle of their head that got all spiky and turned funny colors. The nerve agent also gave them behavioral problems, making them mean. Motor skills were diminished, and most of them became tone deaf. Victims were then turned loose in the city of London, where this new look caught on with young people and a new trend was born. Okay, that's just silly. But as we've seen in this series, governments were very concerned about the rise of punk rock in both North America and Britain. MI5, the branch of the British Secret Service concerned with domestic surveillance, kept a dossier entitled Subversion in Contemporary Music. These files were thick with press clippings and reports from agents in the field who were monitoring the activities of various performers. Why? Because the British government, under Margaret Thatcher, was worried about the effects some of these performers were having on the political and social stability of Britain. All right, so who was under surveillance? The reggae band UB40, for one. The father of singers Ali and Robin Campbell was a Scottish folk singer named Ian Campbell, who just happened to be a card-carrying member of the British Communist Party. And when the boys started singing subversive songs, or so they said, they were secretly investigated as well. UB40 played benefits for the unemployed, for anti-apartheid groups, for people imprisoned for their roles in inner-city riots. They wrote songs critical of the Thatcher government. And in 1987, they toured the Soviet Union, something that no one did at the time, unless, of course, they were part of an official grand cultural exchange program. In the summer of 1990, while the group was on vacation in the Seychelles Islands in the Indian Ocean, their rooms were raided by police, who found a quantity of marijuana. They were given a choice, 3 years in jail or be deported. The group wisely chose deportation, but UB40 insisted that the whole thing was a shadowy government setup in order to A, get them out of the country, and B, hurt their image at home. MI5 also had files on The Clash and Billy Bragg because they too were seen as a little too socialist in their ways. And then there was the Sex Pistols. They were seen as a serious destabilizing force among young people. Government agents tracked their progress very, very carefully. Meanwhile, local authorities were banning the group wherever they could. As soon as the show was announced, the local council would file an injunction, making it impossible for the Sex Pistols to perform.
Every time we get a gig, you get your local councils banning it, and you get no complaints. So, like, there's your local council officials up there thinking, righteous, look at us, look what we're doing for society. Nothing is going to change. Even rehearsing and writing new songs is a problem because you ain't given a chance to do them anywhere. It's my job, and I'm being denied my job, but at the same time, I'm being taxed 80% of everything I earn by people who are stopping me. The councils. They ban my concerts and they take my money.
As a result, the Pistols often had to tour in secret. In fact, one tour was called the Spots Tour, Sex Pistols on Tour Secretly. When the group broke up in January 1978, everybody went back to England, except for Sid Vicious, who decided to move to New York with his girlfriend Nancy Spungen. They didn't do much in New York, except a lot of drugs and the occasional solo show by Sid promoted by Nancy. But then in October 1978, Nancy was murdered, and Sid was charged with her murder. Unfortunately, he never made it to trial because he died of a heroin overdose on February 2, 1979. And this is where the conspiracy comes in. There are those who believe that, like MI5 in Britain, the CIA was very concerned about the destabilizing influence of punk. These theorists maintain that both the CIA and MI5 saw Sid as some kind of leader, an icon. Eliminating the icon would demoralize the whole punk movement, thereby reducing the threat. And that's why, the theorists say, a CIA operative actually sought out Sid's mother and sold her some extra strong heroin, knowing full well that she would give it to Sid. This much is beyond dispute. She did buy smack, Sid did take it out of her purse, Sid did inject it, and having gone through detox, immediately overdosed and died. It's funny, that was February 1979. The original punk movement died out soon after and was replaced by the much less threatening sounds of new wave. A coincidence? There are still those who believe that it couldn't be. No one died in this next conspiracy, but it certainly killed the career of 311 in their home state of Nebraska for a while. Certain unknown people, specifically teachers and administrators in the Omaha school system who were seeking to discredit 311 amongst the student body, started a rumor which led to a crackdown on all things 311. The rumor went like this: 311 is a racist, white supremacist band, and the proof is right there in their name. The number 3 means, well, 3, and K is the 11th letter of the alphabet. Therefore, 311 is code for KKK, Ku Klux Klan. Some people in the Omaha school system actually believed this, and several schools banned 311 t-shirts and music. None of this is true, of course. 311 is code, but it's the code the Omaha Police Department used for indecent exposure. Speaking of attempts to destroy careers, let's talk about Marilyn Manson. Not his more recent Me Too issues, but something that happened in the late 1990s. This was a plot by the Christian right to eliminate him. In 1997, certain groups launched a well-coordinated attack across North America, and here's how it worked. Outraged by what they saw as Marilyn Manson's anti-Christian, quasi-satanic, pro-sex and drug stance, several powerful anti-Manson Christian organizations were created, including something called Empower America. Empower America was led by Bill Bennett, a former Republican cabinet minister who once banned a popular group from playing a 4th of July celebration in Washington because he considered them to be an evil, drug-taking, sexually deprived rock and roll band. You're not going to believe this. He was actually talking about the Beach Boys. That's 100% true. Groups like Empower America and the Christian Family Network, the American Family Association, Oklahomans for Children and Family, and several other underground Christian rights cells began this conspiracy against Manson by obtaining the band's tour itinerary. Several weeks before Manson was scheduled to appear in a city, information packets would start arriving in the mail. These packets were sent to police departments, town councils, newspapers, church groups, and other conservative organizations so that they may be educated about this coming Marilyn Manson thing. The packets contained alleged first-hand accounts of things that actually went on at Marilyn Manson concerts and came complete with legal-looking but anonymous affidavits. These documents told of live homosexual acts that took place on stage, that the band toured with a satanic altar, that underage girls were violated by members of the group during the show, and that there were actual animal sacrifices with puppies and kittens taking place. Recipients were encouraged to copy this material and distribute it to as many people as possible. The problem was, none of this was true. There was no rape, no bestiality, no animal sacrifices, no sex with children. And think about it. Any concert has security people and cops working. If anything illegal like this happened, don't you think that somewhere along the line someone would have been arrested? Unfortunately, very few people, including some city councils and police departments, bothered to check to see if any of these accusations were in fact accurate and true. Instead, they accepted this information as gospel. As a result, Marilyn Manson was banned in dozens of cities while other shows were loudly picketed. Bomb threats were phoned into various venues on the tour, including a show in Toronto in October 1996, where someone threatened to detonate a mustard gas device at the gig. The group lost hundreds of thousands of dollars in ticket sales and concert merchandise, not to mention the fact that this bad publicity resulted in tons of unsold CDs and tapes. There were other stories about Manson, that Manson is a member of a cannibal group and has actually eaten human flesh. Manson cut off one of his toes so he could inject heroin directly into the vein of the stump. Manson once swallowed a whole live cat on stage after having sex with it. Manson is actually black. He just had all the pigment removed from his skin. And you thought all those rumors of him being a child actor on TV shows like Mr. Belvedere and The Wonder Years were silly. There's still much more to cover. Coming up next, is one of the world's biggest female pop stars actually a man? In 2008, there was a new voice on the pop scene, a former bar band singer from New York named Stefani Germanotta. She emerged with a debut album using the name Lady Gaga, and she's since gone on to sell more than 125 million records, along with millions of concert tickets. Plus, she's gained acclaim as an actor. But is this lady really a dude? Or maybe she's somewhere in between. This all began with some photos and concert footage that appeared to be doctored, showing her with a distinct bulge where there shouldn't have been one. Once the clips and photos started circulating, people ran with them, redoctoring them and making the bulge even more obvious. Conspiracy theories jumped on her singing voice, which was slightly deeper than those of her peers. Transphobes and misogynists then jumped on things and amplified the rumors. By 2011, the talk was so loud that she finally broke her silence on the matter on 60 Minutes. But here's what she said. Maybe I do have a penis. Would it be so terrible? Well, that didn't help matters much. The truth is that Stephanie was born biologically female. She ignored the rumors for a long time because she thought it would be a disservice to her trans fans to validate things in any way that might cause shame or controversy over gender confusion. Meanwhile, the rumors were good for business. Keep them guessing, you know. Now let's talk about some so-called artificial music projects, artists that were somehow created by shadowy powers for consumption by the masses. And we'll start with Andrew W.K., the party-hard singer, who is also a record producer and motivational speaker. After years of going nowhere, he started gaining attention in 2000 with a couple of EPs and a debut album called I Get Wet. It was good, fun, hard rockin' stuff. So what's the problem? When some curious fans started digging, they found some odd things. Andrew W.K.'s early albums featured production and writing credits from someone named Steve Mike. He was there as executive producer. Who was that? Probably some associate, right? But then in the mid-2000s, the name Steve Mike showed up on what appeared to be hacked messages from Andrew's website that pointed at some kind of legal dispute over the name Andrew W.K. The conclusion was that Steve Mike was the mastermind who created the whole Andrew W.K. persona. Or he was a rival who was fighting for the rights to the identity Andrew W.K. Again, there's a grain of truth to this. Andrew was involved in a dispute over the name Andrew WK, as it could be used in various circumstances. The fight was, as Andrew later put it, an old friend who ran into some trouble and decided to take it all out on him. Then a Reddit forum started postulating about Andrew WK's appearance. His looks and attitude changed several times in the 2000s. And this theory dates to a show in Elizabeth, New Jersey on December 17, 2004. I quote one theorist. Audience members and security staff claimed that the person singing on stage in Andrew WK's signature white outfit wasn't actually Andrew WK, but someone dressed as him, filling his place as a frontman. Less than halfway through this set, this Andrew WK suddenly left the stage and the rest of the show was canceled, causing quite an uproar. Radio sponsor WSOU was also confused and angry as they tried to figure out what exactly happened. A wave of phone calls flooded the station with people asking, "What happened to the Andrew WK show? Who was that person on stage?" and so on. There were never official answers to most of the questions, but most of the Andrew WK camp scrambled to try and handle the uproar and deflect as many of the accusations as possible. Was this the same guy who released I Got Wet, or had he been replaced? No, the reason for the set being cut short was that it was going beyond curfew, but okay, never mind. Going further, we find that people believe that the person orchestrating everything behind Andrew WK was, in fact, wait for it, Dave Grohl. After all, Dave Grohl gave Andrew WK an opening slot on a Foo Fighters tour several years earlier when Andrew was still an unknown. So, is Steve Mike really Dave Grohl? And then, during a 2008 interview, Andrew, or whatever imposter was being questioned, seemed to lean into the theory that yes, there was something to all these stories. Or was he just having some fun with dumb questions? What about his change in appearance? Well, could it be that he just shaved, lost some weight, and started taking better care of himself? There's your truth. All right, one more PSYOP story. In late 2025, the indie world was suddenly abuzz about a band from Brooklyn called Geese. They seemed to come out of nowhere, getting global attention, radio airplay, a sold-out tour, an appearance at Coachella, and remarkably for a band so young, a musical guest spot on Saturday Night Live. Naturally, when a band gets so big so fast, there will be haters and those suspicious about how a group like Geese could suddenly be everywhere. So, enter the conspiracy theorists. Geese, said the theorists, was a PSYOP, an industry plant. Otherwise, how could a group grow so organically so quickly? Someone must have been pulling the strings. And again, there's a bit of truth to all this. Let's unpack it. Geese was associated with a digital marketing company called Chaotic Good Products, a firm that specialized in, as they call it, digital experiments and musical mayhem. To put it another way, they make things go viral. They used social media networks, TikTok mostly, to game recommendation engines and algorithms. Clips of Geese's music were sprinkled through the social media universe, including in the comment sections and via fake burner accounts representing, possibly, fake fans overseen by the company's internal PR team. The more they did this, the more Geese bubbled up, not only on TikTok, but YouTube, thanks to the way recommendation algorithms work. Thousands and thousands of impressions were made, and thousands of people began to think, this new band Geese is pretty good. This generated word of mouth, again through social media, thereby driving awareness of the band more and more. Eventually, a critical tipping point was reached, and Geese spilled everywhere into the indie world. At its root, this is very clever marketing in a noisy and chaotic world where there is just too much music. But even the people at Chaotic Good Products were surprised at how well this particular campaign worked. But was any of this ethical? I mean, burner accounts and fake fans? It does feel a bit sketchy, using dozens of inauthentic social media accounts to push an unknown band, or is this just the new way of doing business in the music industry? You decide. We are still not done with our conspiracies. We need a part 4. And on the next program, we are going to tackle the biggest and one of the longest-lasting conspiracy theories of all time. I mentioned it at the beginning. Everything that we know about the Beatles is wrong and a lie, and that the real Paul McCartney died in 1966. This is just wild. Until then, catch up on parts 1 and 2 of this special Uncharted series by downloading the podcast from wherever you get your programs. And while you're doing that, try out my other show, The Ongoing History of New Music, which looks at a million different aspects of rock and alt-rock history. There are literally hundreds of episodes to choose from. We can meet up on all the social networks, and I'd love for you to visit my website, ajournalofmusicalthings.com. It's updated with music news and recommendations every day. Get the free daily newsletter while you're at it, and you'll never miss a thing. And once again, feel free to email me about anything at all. I'm at alan@alancross.ca. See you next time for the finale of Music's Greatest Conspiracies. Technical productions by Rob Johnston. I'm Alan Cross.